Hello grade 12s and welcome to your first history lesson of this year. Now this first lesson we're going to do a little bit of a recap on some of the things that you've done last year and maybe even the year before. So we're going to be focusing on the Cold War, which was an interesting era in the history of humankind. But let's have a look back and see how much you remember, shall we? So in grade 11 we looked at the difference between capitalism and communism. We looked at the rise of nationalism. Now that was quite scary for various different countries with nationalism rising up, especially coming out of World War II. Now the two forces of capitalism, communism and the rise of nationalism began to play a part in creating a divided world. You see, American nationalism grew very, very strongly, and this reinforced the advantages of a democratic capitalistic society. However, it was completely contrary and opposite to what Russia was doing, which had a planned communist type of economy. See, the Russian government also promoted nationalism to encourage its people to make sacrifices so it could compete in the arms race and the space race against the USA. Remember how we looked at all those kind of things in the years past? Now, the philosophies and beliefs of democratic capitalism and communism are vastly different, and the difference was too great to allow the friendship between the two superpowers. And so this rivalry started to grow, and unfortunately it started impacting and influencing the rest of the world. Now this rivalry between the two superpowers resulted in the arms race and the space race, and it became known as the Cold War. Now between 1945 and 1989 is also called the Bipolar War because it divided the world into two specific sections. So what we're going to do now, we're going to recap the different political concepts that we've learned so far: capitalism, socialism, and communism. So let's start with a brief summary and a brief analysis of what they all mean. First of all, capitalism. Now this is an economic system and it's based on the concept of survival of the fittest. All right? So the stronger you are, the harder you work, get out there, you can make it happen. Then we have socialism. Now this is an economic system based on you get your share no matter what your contribution is. You contribute, you get what's allocated according to you. And thirdly, we have communism. Now this economic system is different because it's based on you put in your share and you get back your fair share. Let's have a look now at a more in-depth analysis of the three different types of economic governments and economic systems. And we'll start with capitalism. Now capitalism is a term that was first coined by Karl Marx, and he used it to describe a system in which a small group of people own large amounts of money, land, and resources. And it puts all the economy into the hands of wealthy business people, with the only aim being to make more money. Right? So such economies remain free of any kind of government intervention, with all the policies being determined by private individuals. Now this results in there being monopolies. In other words, the money and the wealth of a country stays in the hands of a small group of people. They call them entrepreneurs. Right? So these are the people that go out and drive a financial-based economy. The problem with this is, and there are problems with all different types, is that there's a huge gap in the earnings between the employer and the working class. So if you are in the position where you are employing people, the amount of money that you earn will be significantly different to whether you are an employee, if you're a worker. So in traditional capitalism, imagine it like this. You have two cows, all right? So there's a picture, you've got two cows. You sell one cow and you buy a bull. Now you've got a bull and a cow. Eventually, you end up with more cows and your herd grows. And in this way, as the herd multiplies, so the economy grows. What do? You can sell your excess cows. And so you sell the cows, and from having two cows, you have a herd, you sell the cows, you have money. And so the economy grows and you can retire on the income. Next up we have is socialism. Now, socialism is considered to be a transitional phase between capitalism and communism. Now, when we say transitional, a transition is a movement from one place or position to another. So if we had capitalism and socialism, we step across from one into the other. And it's a phase of movement, all right? So, as we said, socialism is a transitional phase between capitalism and communism. And so you will find all communists will always advocate for socialism because it lays the foundations of communism. Now, there is a considerable disagreement over how the distribution should actually take place. Hence, socialism is said to be between the extreme of capitalism and the extreme of communism. But it's closer to communism if you ask me. Socialism is liberal, and most people have a say in how the economy actually works. So if we look at this diagram that's popping up now on the screen, there are 5 attributes which are accorded to socialism. And we'll start at the top and we'll go around clockwise. So at the top we see that society is more than the individual. Remember, in capitalism, it's the survival of the fittest. We mentioned that earlier, which means that you are the one who's going out and looking after yourself. You are first and foremost. But what they're saying in socialism is that the society as a whole is important, and you make up a part. So society is more than just an individual person, it's the country as a whole. If we go to the right, the next point is all humans are equal. No argument there from me. Don't know how you feel about that. History is a wave of progressivism. In other words, we develop and grow and move forward step by step together. All humans are productive. Well, we know that's not necessarily true, but under socialism, there is an expectation that everybody contributes. And human welfare is a societal objective. So society is looking after itself. The idea of looking after each other, looking after humans, becomes part of the collective, becomes part of the whole. So ideally, it sounds like socialism is the right way to go. But it's an interesting thing. Have a look at this little cartoon, which I'm putting up on the screen behind me. Socialism, sign up here. On the left, work hard and keep half. Capitalism. On the right-hand side, no work, free stuff. See, that's where socialism falls down, is that you don't have to be a contributing member of society, but you still get things given to you. So the next thing we're going to look at now is the other extreme, and we're going to be looking at communism in a little bit more detail. So what do we mean by communism? Let's have a think about that. Karl Marx says that this is the final stage towards the development of an egalitarian society. Here, all resources are state-owned, and it's the state that determines the distribution based on the needs of the people in an effort to bring about equality. So, if you don't need something and someone else does, it's owned by the state, not by you, and the state can allocate accordingly. So let's go back and have a look at our cow scenario, shall we? Let's use that as an example. You have 2 cows. The state takes them both, and when the state thinks you need it, they will give you some milk. And that's it. That's a very simplified concept of communism. So everything is owned by the state. Technically, everybody is equal. But the question is, how does that work in practice? Does that really work? That's something that you will have to decide about when you think about the differences between capitalism, socialism, and communism. So now we've looked at these 3 different approaches of economics. And we've mentioned already that the conflict between the 2 superpowers, namely Russia and America, resulted in what we call the Cold War. But we're now moving into a worldwide scenario where people and countries are communicating with each other all the time. So how did the Cold War period affect and shape international relationships after the Second World War? Well, let's go back to what I said earlier on in the introduction. During World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union fought together as allies against Germany, and both celebrated the defeat of Germany in 1945. However, the relationship between the two nations was a tense one. Americans had long been very wary and cautious of Soviet communism, and they were concerned about Russian leader Joseph Stalin and his tyrannical, bloodthirsty rule of his own country. He was really quite a tyrant. Now, the conflict between America and the Soviet Union lasted until 1989. Quite a long time, all right? That conflict was there, and it was quite significant when that conflict finally came to an end. But it also raised incredible tensions in the globe, around the globe, and with the economies because of the anger and the destruction between the two of them. So during the Second World War, the USA and the British Empire and Russia, as we said, came together and formed the Grand Alliance against the Axis. So we had the Allies and the Axis powers. Now, while Britain and USA had much in common, for example, they had a common history, they shared cultures, they shared languages, they were suspicious of Stalin. And they viewed communism as a threat to their economies and their societies. Bear in mind that there was an aggressive drive to spread communist ideals and communist thinking by Stalin and Russia at the time. So the Cold War can best be described as a war between two superpowers where no direct fighting takes place. So that's a bit odd. How can it be a war if there's no fighting? Well, that's why we called it a Cold War. It never resulted in arm-to-arm combat or military combat. We need to learn to live with the COVID virus, you know, the new normal, at least for the next few months. And we have just what you need to make sure you never miss a single school lesson. And it's absolutely free, mahala! High quality, powerful, animated lessons for all your subjects. So don't spend a cent until you have tried iWiz. It's everything you need. All video lessons, textbooks, workbooks, exam prep. We want you to ace 2021.